So if I learned one thing this week is that I need to continually be praying for Mike and Dustin, especially when they're teaching. It's one of those times, and I remember this back, at Grace when we used to do Bible studies and stuff like this. That's the week that you get everything thrown at you. You get busy at work, or something happens at home, or the car breaks, or whatever it is. I was on the backside of the clock all this last week, and so I would get to my hotel and I'd be like, I don't care about gold. I don't want to know about gold. I don't want to care. I just want to go to bed. And then I threw my back out. And then it was like, and so not only do I not care, but I'm going to bed. Yeah. So, but that's fine. So having said that, this morning we're going to talk about gold, how it's referenced in Matthew chapter 2. If you want to go ahead and turn there, we are going to start there this morning. In a continuance of what Dustin covered last week. So when Mike and Dustin asked me to join them in going over these, which I appreciated. First thing I do is I go to my eSword and I start typing in gold. And it came out as 382 times listed in the Bible. It went to 380. So as I start banging my head on the table and cursing their names, that I have a lot of work to do in front of me, that's when Mike called me. And he said, why don't we do breakfast? And we did. And did you enjoy your cinnamon roll? Yes, yeah. But we had breakfast, and he came in, and he brought all of his notes. So putting that out there here. So Mike has already done the heavy lifting on a lot of this stuff. So he sits there, and he said, gold, frankincense, myrrh, put all this stuff out. I walked in with a half a sheet of paper to breakfast. I was like, gold is a rock. Gold is shiny. That's about all I had. And then he had all this stuff. He had everything laid out. So I did appreciate that. So much. See how this... So, no, I do appreciate that. So a lot of the notes, a lot of the facts and things that, did come from Mike's notes. So what do we think about gold? Maybe with Christmas coming up, I was joking with Jennifer. I was like, well, maybe you're thinking Christmas. You're like, maybe that's coming. Maybe you're thinking of it as an investment. Like you wish you would have bought some 25 years ago when it was at its low point, and now it's at its high point. All right. Maybe you're thinking of it as that. Do you guys ever see that William Devane commercial in the Roslyn Capitol? So actually look, you know what it is? It's like, buy gold, buy, and here's, it comes during the ball games and all this other stuff. And it's so annoying to me, of course I had to look it up. In the past 30 days, it has aired 30,228 times. And I was like, I think I've seen them all. Yeah, that's why I turned the TV off. Yeah. Maybe you think of gold as just as jewelry. I got my gold ring. Maybe you have some things that you have at home, things that are precious to you as what. Or maybe you're those among us who only think biblically, and you're thinking of the streets of gold that Revelation talks about that is yet to come. So as we continue our discussion in Matthew chapter 2, only adding to what Dustin went over last week, we'll take a look at the gifts the Magi brought to Jesus. And so today is gold. And then the next 2 weeks, Mike is going to cover frankincense and myrrh. But we'll start in chapter 2. We're not going to read the whole thing, since Dustin did that last week. But let me start off here. Verse 1. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east, and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Drop down to verse 10. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. I'm going to come back to that verse, because that ended up being like one of my favorite verses, just kind of reflecting on what that all meant. Verse 11. And after he came to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures, and presented him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. I want you to notice, what did they do first? Did they give him the gifts? What did they do first? They bowed down. They worshipped him. I was like, wow. That's a whole lesson. We could do an hour on that alone. John MacArthur said it this way: right worship is always and must be the only basis for right giving, right learning, and right service. Let me say that one more time. Right worship is always and must be the only basis for right giving, right learning, and right service. I thought that was cool. So our purpose here is to take a look at the gift of gold and attempt to see why the Magi thought this to be an appropriate gift and the perceived symbolism. Dustin covered some of that last week. And as you can imagine, there's various theories concerning this. Many scholars throughout church history have believed that these gifts carry a special symbolic meaning towards Jesus' life. Dustin went over, he gave an example that was also in Mike's notes, which I thought was pretty cool. From St. Irenaeus, he died in 202, the first century, right? In his Adverses, his book is called Against Heresies. And again, Dustin mentioned this last week, offered the following interpretation. He said, for the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, respectively, King, God, suffering Redeemer, in that order. For the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, respectively, King, God, suffering Redeemer, as well as virtue, prayer, and suffering. So specifically for gold today, we'll explore Jesus being our King, or his kingship, and his divinity. So before we go on, Jennifer and I actually talked about this the other day. I'm not one to be given into speculation because I'm the first one that will always shut her down in the car when something happens. Something you hear about, a neighbor did something, or a relationship happens, or something goes on, and Jennifer will be like, well, I bet that. I'll be like, hold on. We don't know. There's always two sides of the story. We don't have all the facts. So I apologized. It was like we want to, and she was like, "Yeah, if that's happened more than once." I'm like, "Well, that's the way we roll, right?" But in this case, the Bible doesn't make any claim as to the nature or meaning of these gifts, and Dustin mentioned that as well. But now, 2,000 years later, I'm pretty sure we have most of the facts that we're going to gather, and we can proceed with caution. Not only that, but at the outset of studying all this, I didn't know a lot about these, that the gifts were even seen symbolically. And I would even look back on this and be thinking, why were these Magi giving myrrh to a baby? Myrrh is like embalming fluid, or it's like an embalming spice. It's like that makes no sense. Seeing it symbolically, I was like, oh, okay, now maybe some of these things make sense. We're just exploring. We're just looking at this. We just sang the song. To quote Tim Hawkins, Amy, because he has a habit of bringing out some of the Christmas carols and some of the, it's like, are we really hearing what we're singing kind of thing. We just sang, a child, shivers in the cold. Let us bring him silver and gold. Tim Hawkins goes, what about a blanket? What about a coat? What about something warm? How about a cup of soup? Something like that. So I'm like, so there's a lot of things to explore in looking at this. The point is, we're trying to be careful. We're not trying to build anything out of bounds or propose any new theology or any new disciplines. We want to be good stewards of the Word. Dustin rightfully, and I like this, I didn't even put two and two together. He talked about being prescriptive versus descriptive. I started taking notes. I was like, oh, so we're not prescribing any new theology. We're not bringing out anything new. This is all descriptive. We're just taking a look. We're just, so there's a lot of church historians and scholars that won't give any of this any credence. I couldn't find any, but that's fine too. That's fine that, if they don't want to go with that. So just as long as we're all on the same page. So why did the Magi give gold to a young child? There's clues that indicate why giving gold was the appropriate gift. Many of these clues can be found if we take a look at how it was used and perceived in the ancient Near East. And I think you'll see right off the bat that giving gold to a king was incredibly common. But I found, and I kind of matched these up with Mike's notes, that they give 5 or 6 defining traits for gold. And by looking at these, it just kind of helps us define what gold meant to their culture, but also helps us define its significance to our study as well. A lot of this is just kind of, I'm going to read these things off. I promise we're going to be flipping a lot of pages here in the second half of what's going on here. First off, gold is extremely rare and of great value. Gold has always been an extremely rare commodity, which contributes to its high value. It's now listed 3rd on the list of precious rare metals. I didn't know that either. It's now behind rhodium, don't know what that is, and platinum. However, but because of its visual appearance and its high gloss luster, it still makes number 1 on the list on the metal that's most sought after. See the difference there? Because of this, gold became used as a form of currency even before the first actual minted coins ever came into existence. The Egyptians were probably the first ones to come up with these types of coins. You've heard of the shekel. That's in the Bible as well. The shekel, I've looked at pictures of shekels. Some are square, some are diamond, some are triangles, some are round. It's kind of like a piece of metal. It might be gold mixed in with some silver, something like that. And then they would just use this for trading. It was the Egyptians. The shekel was came around. That was about 1500 BC. The first gold coins, however, were created by a guy by the name of King Croesus about 600 BC. And what made Croesus, historians called him the most magnificently wealthy ruler of the Lydian kingdom of the 6th century BC. That's before he was taken over by the Persians. So what made him so wealthy was that Croesus was one of the first kings to develop mining techniques to be able to go out and get gold and silver out of the hills. And because he was able to develop this, he became an extremely rich man. In fact, back in the Persian kingdom, they walked around with the phrase and they would say, "May you be as rich as Croesus." That was a common phrase to them. So by Roman times came around, primarily gold, but in some cases silver and bronze were used as a primary currency. So with all of these qualities, even with those being rare, you see that there's quite a bit of parallelism. If gold is extremely rare and of great value, and you have a lot of it, then your king, queen, your country would then be perceived as special and also of having great value. So another example of this is we take a look at gold's physical properties. Gold has a unique physical properties such as excellent malleability. And what that is, just you can bend it, you can make things, you can shape it, right? Ductility means you can flatten it out. You can even draw it out into thin wires. It's also good for electronics. Some of your electronics have gold tip endings on them to give a better connection, right? And it's also resistant to corrosion and tarnish. And it will also last for a very long time. So also gold does not tarnish or fade. And for those of you who remember sitting around the dining room table polishing the silver, does anyone still do that? Remember those days? Our grandparents, they would polish the silver. I think our generation or so came around, we're like, I don't think we want that. We're not going to take that from you. But thanks, gold doesn't do that. Gold doesn't tarnish or fade. So by using and proclaiming that property, the Greek gods were said to have adopted the same characteristics of the gold itself, and that became and made them immortal. Because it lasts forever, they last forever. Third thing is that gold has always been seen as a symbol of perfection. We see this in the Olympic Games. What is it that we strive after? What's the highest prize? To get the gold medal. That in particular the gold medal has only been around since 1904, since they started passing out gold medals. But the whole idea of this perfection and everything else, the Olympics have been around since 776 BC. That was the first one in Athens. In some households, you were taught to live by the golden rule. Remember that? Do unto others, blah, 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 right? So it's only natural when observing ancient civilizations that you want to portray all of these characteristics to make your culture and your society look the very best. So you'll see their gold in their architecture. You'll see gold in how they decorate their walls and their ceilings, their vases, their frames, their flatware, their what they eat with, their plates. Even the capstone on the Egyptian pyramids were said to have a gold capstone on the very top. And can you imagine back in the ancient Near East, coming from miles and miles away, seeing this because it would reflect the sun and be able to see that and be like, wow, the place that we're going to has some significance. I've never seen this before. We can also look at gold, number 4, as an investment and stability. Gold has always been used as a safe haven asset during economic stability. Investors tend to flock to gold in times of crisis, and if gold is seen in your culture as a byproduct of stability, then your king and kingdom would also be seen as a place of stability economically, militarily, provisionally. You have that kind of stability because of your investments there. So take all of those, and now we can kind of look at the next area, which is historical use. These seem to be more of a byproduct of everything that we've just talked about. If gold gives you stability, if your gold is a symbol of your perfection, if it's of great value, then like many cultures, you kind of tend to go to the next step, and like the Egyptians and the Greek royalty commonly used to do things like bury gold along with their dead and do things like that. They thought that it had such value that it's like, we're going to bury them, we're going to make tombs, we're going to do some of these other things. Did anyone go and see King Tut's tomb? What is it, Kosai, like a couple of years ago? We never made it. I was curious if anyone had gone to see that. Now, in studying this, I kind of wish that I had, because it's some amazing artifacts, some things that they brought in King Tutankhamen's, is that how you say it, his tomb? He became pharaoh when he was 9, and he died when he was 18. That was King Tut. He was buried in a coffin made of gold. Inside his tomb, British archaeologists have found over 4,000 precious artifacts. The total weight of gold items and jewelry was 2,645 pounds. That's a lot of gold. The tomb is only one out of 138 burials of the pharaohs preserved intact to this day. That comes from the Global Intergold website. So we can definitely see the connection between royalty and gold as well. And in a few minutes, we're going to see the same kind of example in the life of Solomon when we turn into the Old Testament. And this stuff is just amazing. So in addition to these definitions that we see from here, we can see that gold is also used for religious practices. Mike, I didn't print off your article, but Mike had found an article from the CBS News website that just 2 years ago in Greece, archaeologists excavating a sanctuary honoring the ancient Greek goddess Artemis have announced they discovered a significant number of structures as well as plentiful relics, including gold and silver jewels. The temple found in the 2023 excavations dated back to the 7th century BC. We're finding this stuff everywhere. I mean, it's just amazing what they've been able to uncover. So you think about all the religious monuments around the world. Buddha comes to mind. Buddha is always made of gold, or he's painted gold. In some cases, he's made out of real gold. Quickly, I want to tell you about my Bhutan story. I got to fly into the country of Bhutan. It's right next to Nepal. And we took a tour. Guides were great. You always have to have a guide when you go around that country. So our guides took us into the capital city. Part of that was to go to Buddha's temple kind of thing. I'm like, fantastic. You got to take your shoes off and do all this other stuff. So I'm walking in, and this is pure Dave Ransopher. You just have to know how this works. I go and I'm like, okay, well, this is cool. This is right. Everything is gold. Everything, all around. The walls, everything else. And I go up and I just kind of put my hand on the wall. Well, the wall is just plywood. And it's painted gold. And it moved a little bit. And I was like, hey guys, I think the wall's moving. And I pushed on a little bit, and the upper hook on the whole thing came off, and the whole wall comes swinging down. This is in Buddha's tomb. So guards are coming over, and I have no idea what they're saying. So I'm like, I'm sorry, I'll grab my shoes and I'll leave, and I go walking out. I'm like, so it's just painted gold. And a lot of it was just fake. And I don't mean that to be disparaging. It's just painted, it's probably made out of wood or something else, and then they just kind of paint it on the outside. But these places are everywhere. On the whole outside were these gold monuments and, some of their figurines. You've seen them walking through any Hilton anymore. You can walk through the Hilton and see all of these, Buddhist things going through. So anyway, back to the point. It's often used, and even in some cultures like the Greeks, use their gold in their offerings to their gods. Right? The Greek gods were often depicted as wearing gold clothing, jewelry, and armor to show their divine status and authority. For example, Zeus, right, the king of gods, and I only knew this, Matt, because I went to Vegas too, and I went into Caesar's palace and I saw the display, right? Zeus, the king of gods, had a golden throne and a thunderbolt for his weapon. Biblically, however, gold was unfortunately used in the creation of idols. I could find 2, Nebuchadnezzar's golden idol from Daniel chapter 3. Remember when he made that idol and they came up with the decree, they said everyone must bow to this golden idol. And Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego said, and we're not going to do that. And off to the fiery furnace they went, if you remember that story. The other one was the golden calf made by Aaron in Exodus 32. If you remember that one. Moses had been gone too long. The people came to Aaron. They said, make us a golden idol that we should worship it. And he did. I'm like, turn with me to Acts 17. Paul actually addresses this. Excuse me. Acts 17:29. Paul writes, therefore, since we are the descendants of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the human skill and thought. Divine nature is God creating us in His image. That's the divine nature. He created us in His image. Rather, what does man try to do? We're always trying to take images and idols and other things and create them in our image. So I thought that was good. Okay, moving on. There are some practical reasons for the Magi giving the gift of gold. And if we go back, I'm sorry, I should have told you to keep your finger in Matthew chapter 2, but you might even have it memorized by now. Matthew 2:11. These are the practical reasons for giving the gift of gold. After they came into the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now I want you to look what happens just 2 verses later. Just drop down to verse 13. Now when they had gone, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, get up, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt, and stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. So Joseph got up, took the child and his mother while it was still night, and left for Egypt. So for the gift of gold, the most obvious, I think, Mike and Destin gave me the easy one. Gold was used provisionally. This was obviously a way for Mary and Joseph to be able to flee Israel, to be able to flee Bethlehem, to be able to go down to Egypt and stay there 2 years until the death of Herod. A second possible outcome in the life of Jesus has to do with Joseph, his father. You guys think of, when's the last time that we hear about Joseph? When's the last time we really... It's actually in Luke 2:48 when Mary and Joseph lose Jesus in Jerusalem, right? In the church. They thought that he was a part of the caravan, and then they turn around, they're like, where is he? And they go back and get him, why didn't you stay with us? That whole thing, right? So if you think about that, that's the last time we really hear about Joseph. Some of the theories and thought on that is that he passed away. Something happened to Joseph in there. So the gold, the frankincense, the myrrh would have provided provisionally for Mary in those times, as now a widow, to be able to go and raise the child on her own. But if you consider how Mary and Joseph came into Bethlehem only on a donkey and left with the means to provide for shelter, food, transportation, maybe a cart, maybe all sorts of stuff that they were able to provide provisionally for them. Okay, so those are the practical meanings behind the gift of gold. Now what about the symbolic meanings for gold? And it's actually found right here in our text. If we can stay right here in Matthew 2, verse 2. First of all, though, Matthew is continually, as an author, Matthew is always presenting Christ as king. And he's just doing more here. And here we see that they call him King of the Jews. Verse 2, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? They already know he's a king. They've already come here. We're just looking for him. Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? So symbolically, they're saying right here, this is the kingship. We know that he's a king. This is the obvious part. For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. And that's the last part. The come to worship him symbolizes his deity. You know? So what is it that we worship? You only worship a deity, unless you're a Buckeye fan and kind of go off the rails. We only worship, we only worship gods. So that is a part of his deity right there. So gold was a common gift to a king in the ancient Near East, and there's quite a few examples in the Old Testament. We're only going to take a look at a couple of them here. If you turn with me to 2 Samuel chapter 8, and we're going to go through these pretty quickly. 2 Samuel 8. If you stay with me here, I'm going to kind of skip through this pretty quickly. Verse 1. Now it happened afterward that David defeated the Philistines and subdued them. And David took control of the chief city from the hand of the Philistines. Verse 2. And he defeated Moab. Drop down to 3. And David defeated Hadadezer. Drop down to 7. David took the shields of gold, which were carried by the servants of Hadadezer, and brought them to Jerusalem. Drop down to 9. And when Toi, the king of Hamath, heard that David had defeated the whole army of Hadadezer, Toi sent his son Joram to King David to greet him and bless him, because he, David, had fought Hadadezer and defeated him. So that made Toi's day, right? For Hadadezer had been at war with Toi, and Joram brought him articles of silver, gold, and bronze. Again, this is a common gift to kings. King David also consecrated these gifts to the Lord with the silver and gold that he had consecrated from all the nations which he had subdued. Secondly, now turn over to 1 Kings chapter 10. And this is a story about the Queen of Sheba. 1 Kings 10. Verse 1. Now when the Queen of Sheba heard about the fame of Solomon in relation to the name of the Lord, she came to test him with riddles. So she came to Jerusalem with a very large entourage, with camels carrying balsam oil and a very large quantity of gold and precious stones. When she came to Solomon, she spoke to him about everything that was in her heart. Michael did the research on this and found that this large quantity of gold might have been upwards of 4.5 tons of gold. It's like, I don't know how you carry that much, but that's a lot of gold. Drop down to verse 9. The queen is still speaking here. Blessed be the Lord your God, who delighted in you to put you on the throne of Israel, because the Lord loves Israel forever. He made you king to do justice and righteousness. Then she gave the king 110 talents of gold and a very large amount of balsam oil and precious stones. Never again did such a large quantity of balsam oil come in, so that that which the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. So again, a common trait is giving gold, amongst other things, as you saw, to a king. Drop down to verse 23. What's interesting here is that anyone who even wanted to have an audience with Solomon would bring him gifts, specifically silver and gold. Verse 23 of chapter 10. So King Solomon became greater than all the kings of the earth in wealth and wisdom. And all the earth was seeking the attention of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart. And they were bringing everyone a gift. Articles of silver and gold, garments, weapons, balsam oil, horses and mules. So much year by year. All this to show that Solomon's palace was filled with gold and the nicest amenities the world has ever seen. If you back up a little bit in 1 Kings 10, verse 14, kind of jump back a little bit. Now the weight of the gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. Let me go over that real quick. A talent is about 63 pounds. And I need to go back. This is just what I could find. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, because the numbers are staggering. So if a talent is 63 pounds, let's go this way. The current price of gold in the U.S. on December 2nd was $2,634 an ounce. Okay? So there's 16 ounces to a pound. That gives you $42,146 per pound of gold. A talent is 63 pounds. Nate's doing all this in his head. I can see the wheels turning. Yeah. A talent is 63 pounds. That gives you $2,655,213. She gave him 120 talents. That gives you $318,625,560. Okay. Yeah. Again, all this to show that Solomon's palace was just filled with gold. And we drop down to, we already started in verse 14, that the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. Besides that, from the traders and the wares of the merchants and all the kings of the Arabs and the governors of the country, King Solomon made 200 large shields of beaten gold, used 600 shekels of gold on each large shield. Verse 18. Moreover, the king made a large throne of ivory and overlaid it with fine gold. Verse 21. Now all King Solomon's drinking utensils were all of gold, and all the utensils of the house of the timber of Lebanon were of pure gold. None was of silver. It was not considered as amounting to anything in the days of Solomon. Verse 23. So Solomon became greater than all the kings of the earth in wealth and wisdom. And all the earth was seeking the attention of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart. These verses also echoed, if you're taking notes, in 2 Chronicles chapter 9. It's also interesting to note that kings and queens of royalty, in general, had their crowns also made of gold. And you've seen this in just about every movie, that at least of that period. If you've ever seen the series The Crown, not highly recommending it, but if you even click on that, it's on Amazon Prime to see the opening. It's all about this weaving of the gold and making the crown, and it goes with this really daunting music and that's making you see the leaflets come out on the crown and whatnot. King Solomon did this as well, as noted. You don't have to turn there in 2 Samuel 12:30. It says, "Then he took the crown of the king from his head, and its weight was a talent of gold." So if my numbers were right, that's a 63-pound crown. I don't know how you put that on your head. And it was a talent of gold, and it had a precious stone, and it was placed on David's head. So we can see that kingship and gold just go hand in hand. So I want to close just this portion if we turn to Isaiah 60. And this one's pretty cool. Then we'll move on to deity. In this section we read a prophecy for when Jesus has returned. This is his second advent. This is when he comes back. So this is in the future. And it says, "The glory of the Lord will be shining on Israel, And it's Christmas time, and if any of you listen to Handel's Messiah, and you're familiar with the glory of the Lord stanza, this one's for you. My Bible actually titles this section, The Future Glory of Israel. Isaiah 60 verse 1, Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. For behold, darkness will cover the earth, and deep darkness the peoples, but the Lord will rise upon you, and his glory will appear upon you. Nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. Raise your eyes around and see. They all gather. They come to you. Your sons will come from afar, and your daughters will be carried on the hip. Then you will see and be radiant, and your heart will thrill and rejoice. This kind of matches back with the favorite verse that I told you from back in Matthew, that the Magi, when they saw the star, they were just exceedingly glad, and they rejoiced. Your heart will thrill and rejoice, because the abundance of the sea will be turned to you. The wealth of the nations will come to you. A multitude of camels will cover you, the young camels of Midian and Ephah, and those from Sheba will come. They will bring gold and frankincense and proclaim the good news of the praises of the Lord. Take a look at that again. What did they bring? They brought gold and frankincense. Where's the myrrh? Didn't have to bring myrrh, but they brought gold and frankincense. So myrrh speaks of suffering, right, symbolically. If we're only talking symbolically, right, if myrrh is suffering, then why was it included here? Because what are we talking about? This is the second coming. This is the second advent. This is the second coming of Christ. There is no more suffering. So look at this. So now there's no more need for the myrrh. There's no more need for that symbolic gift to be given. Again, we're just being descriptive, right? But the absence of myrrh is very telling. If it's just a gift, then myrrh is really valuable, then why not include it here? So let's move on. So how might gold symbolize the deity of Jesus? So I think to go back and think of the Magi coming from such a far distance, I just have to imagine what some of their conversations were, coming that long distance. Be like, we have studied all this stuff. We have investigated these things. We have stayed true to reading the Word and knowing, and we see the star and we're following it. I mean, everything is kind of coming together, right? So they already know that they're coming to worship a king. They already know that this is why they're coming. So we see in the text of how gold is thought to represent deity, and now it's used everywhere royalty was, in temples, ivory thrones, gold walls, etc. So if God represents perfection, his holiness then is without blemish or error. So if these Magi knew about the prophecy, then they also probably knew about the Ark of the Covenant. They probably knew about some of the other things, Solomon's temple. Some of these other things were in the Old Testament. Let's turn to Exodus chapter 25. Exodus 25 verse 1. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Tell the sons of Israel to take a contribution from me. From everyone whose heart moves him from you shall take my contribution. This is the contribution you are to take from them, gold, silver, and bronze. Drop down to verse 8. Have them construct a sanctuary for me, so that I may dwell among them, according to all that I'm going to show you, as the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all of its furniture, you shall construct it. I think it's really interesting that God was giving specific instructions on how to build this tabernacle. Specific so much that it was like, this is going to be so amazing that there's no way that anyone could even possibly assume that you're building an idol, that you're doing this out of the hands of men. that you're coming up with this on your own. I'm going to give you so many instructions, and this is going to be so spectacular that it's just going to be an amazing thing for all to see. The Ark of the Covenant, from drop down to verse 25, verse 10. And they shall construct an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits high. You shall overlay it with pure gold. Inside and out you shall overlay it, and you shall make gold molding around it. Drop down to 15. Even the poles shall remain in the rings of the ark, and shall not be removed, and they are also made of gold. Verse 18, you shall make 2 cherubim of gold. You drop down to even verse 25 and 23. 23 and 25. You see everything in here is either made of gold, overlaid with gold. The rings are made of gold. The lampstands, in verse 31, you shall make a lampstand of pure gold. Drop down to 40. Again, it kind of states what it stated in the very beginning of the chapter. See that you make them by the patterns for them which was shown to you on the mountains. So Solomon continues with this even when he builds the temple. We're not going to take the time to go through 1 Kings and all those this morning. I think you get the general premise. There's a lot of this that goes on through here. 1 Kings 22, he overlaid the entire house with gold, and all the house was finished. Have you guys ever been down to southern Ohio? And there's a place down there called Buckeye Furnace. Does that ring any bells? Buckeye Furnace was used during the Civil War to bring in ore from the mountains down there around southern Ohio, and it would take them to these furnaces. They would put them through the top, and there was called a smelting process. We've talked about this before in our discussions. But in this smelting process, you would heat up the ore to so much that the impurities rise up to the top. That's called the dross. And then you would take just a skimmer and go right across the top of the dross, and it would take all the impurities out, and then you have more of a pure ore, right, that you can make, in the case of the Civil War, for bullets, cannons, weapons, guns, things like that, right? Huge advantage that we had that during the Civil War for the Union Army, right? This is kind of the same thing. Dross is described as a base which is pretty much worthless. There's no dross in God's Word. Psalm 12:6 says, "The words of the Lord are flawless, like silver purified in a crucible, like gold refined 7 times." So if you take that idea of this gold that's tied symbolically with God and His deity and His kingship, and refining it 7 times, that's putting it into the fire 7 times, raising whatever dross is left, making it as pure gold as you possibly can. Does that make sense? So in a figurative sense, the Bible said God purges the impurities and worthless dross from His people by a spiritual refining process of discipline, testing, and trials. He does the same thing to us, right? So my conclusions here is this. And I was thinking about this the other day. There used to be a bumper sticker out there that said, "Wise men still seek Him." You guys ever seen that? I said, that's pretty cool. And again, I told you my favorite verse in this was Matthew 2, verse 10. "When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy." So the Magi, again, were following all these Old Testament prophecies to the letter. They knew, and it had to be just excited beyond belief when they saw the star and they started their journey. They got to Jerusalem, and moreover, when they got to Jerusalem, Herod didn't know what they were talking about. He was disturbed, right? The people of Jerusalem were disturbed. I can't imagine what the Magi were even thinking, but they rejoiced, and they were exceedingly with great joy. So I really had to give that scenario some thought. So 2 closing verses here. Turn to Revelation chapter 3. This chapter is one of the letters to the churches. This is the one to Laodicea. This is the one where Jesus says, I know your deeds, that you were neither hot nor cold. And because you were neither hot nor cold, you were lukewarm, and I spit you out of my mouth. But if you look at Revelation 3, verse 17, because you say, I am rich and have become wealthy and have no need of anything, and you do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. So you're basically saying, I have all the earthly gold I need. I have everything. I'm secure, right? Verse 18, I advise you to buy from me gold refined by fire, so that you may come rich, and white garments, so that you may clothe yourself, and the shame of your nakedness will not be revealed, and eye salve to apply to your eyes, so that you may see. This gold refined by fire is your accepting of the inheritance that He offers. This is our genuine faith. So when He says test it in the fire, for us to have that, there's only one result to that, and that's for us to praise Him, to honor Him, and marvel at the glory of the revelation of Jesus Christ. So when He speaks of this gold, I want you to turn to this, our last verse, 1 Peter chapter 1. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 3. Blessed be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to His great mercy has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. Verse 4, to obtain an inheritance, now catch this, which is imperishable, undefiled, and will not fade away. What does that sound like? What is imperishable, undefiled, and will not fade away? That's the gold that we were just talking about, reserved in heaven for you. Verse 5, who are protected by the power of God through the faith for salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. In this you greatly rejoice, even though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been distressed by the various trials, so that the proof of your faith, being more precious than gold, which perishes through the testing by fire, may be found to result in praise, glory, and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. So where are we? We're right back where the Magi began. Praise Him right before they gave Him the gifts. So we do that. So